Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat?
I would say that I like to stress the process over results. It's important to me to stress accountability and to always make practice stressful for the players so that game day is easy. So those are three things I like to key on.
That's the voice of Klint Kubiak. That was when he was with the Minnesota Vikings as their offensive coordinator, and now, obviously, leaving San Francisco for New Orleans. Brian Peacock covers the 49ers for Locked On 49ers, and he's good enough to join us for a couple of minutes here. How are you, man?
I'm doing fantastic, yeah. Just trying to help my listeners on Locked On 49ers recover from a Super Bowl loss, and they keep losing coaches every offseason, too, so got to get them through that as well.
I wasn't even going to bring up the Super Bowl, honestly, but as a Saints fan and remember when the Saints and the Niners won the old NFC West? I have no love lost for the Niners, so I was ecstatic, and I'm reveling in your misery. But that's all I really have right now. So, hey, let's talk a little bit about Klint Kubiak, if we could. What was when Shanahan brought Kubiak to San Francisco? What was the reaction to that hire?
To be honest with you, it's difficult because Kyle Shanahan is such a control freak, and you never know how much he's going to allow or let affect the other coaches in his room, affect what he's doing, how much he's imparting on the other coaches around him. But I do know there's, and Kyle Shanahan's the play caller, and it's his offense, and he's the offensive coordinator, and we're learning he's the quasi-defensive coordinator as well, so I don't know how much Steve Wilks was allowed to run actually his own defense, which I think is a big part of all of the Steve Wilks being fired. But when you talk about bringing in Klint Kubiak and then not really knowing how much Mike McDaniel all those years was doing behind the scenes, you realize how much collaborative effort there really is in game planning and what everybody's bringing and how they're trying to figure out how to beat the opposing defenses, and then Kyle Shanahan brings it all together. And I think one of the strengths Kyle Shanahan has is how he looks at his play calling and how he looks at plays. And when you bring something to him and he dissects the entire play and says, okay, this is good, but what about if the defense does this, and it's not going to work because of this, and you have to go back to the drawing board. You keep going, and I think there's a lot of sort of iron sharpening iron that goes on behind the scenes with Kyle Shanahan and his offensive assistants, and I think that's why his assistants have had such great opportunities and success around the league.
That's an interesting way to put it. So if Shanahan is such a control freak, then was there any material role that Klint Kubiak played that you could look at this season and say, okay, that was Kubiak's influence?
Not really. It's so difficult to be able to do that. You do know that when you are the run game coordinator, you're the passing game coordinator, or you're the quarterback's coach, Kyle Shanahan will listen to you, and he trusts his coaches. And I think it's a great sign if Kyle Shanahan chooses you as a coach, because I think he has a great eye for coaching talent. He's probably got a better eye for coaching talent than he does playing talent. And he's got a better eye for assistant coaches than he has quarterbacks in a lot of ways. And he's good at helping those guys develop under him. But in the end, it's all him, and he decides what goes and what doesn't, and what the 49ers are going to do. But, just like Kyle did with his dad, Mike, and Klint with his dad, Gary, I don't know that you could find somebody who's never called plays in the NFL that you would have more hope could be a really good offensive coordinator than someone like Klint Kubiak.
Brian Peacock is our guest on Twitter at BDPeacock. You'll give him a follow, Locked On 49ers. So when you look at it's interesting because what the Saints are trying to do, obviously, is what Miami did or what Houston did. Like, you're looking at these guys from the Shanahan tree and saying, okay, how do I get one of those branches and just plant it here and make it work? So when you look at the guys I just mentioned, be it in Miami or at Houston or elsewhere, what evidence do you see of the Shanahan tree that makes sense in those places?
It's funny, too, because I think instantly, and even if you go back to LaFleur and McVay and, everybody that worked together in Washington, and you look at what Kyle Shanahan's offense looks like in his personnel, and you look at McVay's offense and his personnel, and you look at Bobby Slowick and what happened in Houston there in year one, which was phenomenal. And then Mike McDaniel's just a complete mad scientist. And I love the way he just doesn't care what you think about what he's going to do or what he's going to say. And he does things his own way. If you're just watching these offenses, there's motion and, there's some staples and some things that you can see that correlate to each other. But I think they're all so different in their own right, which is, I think, really important, because you can just pull out Kyle Shanahan's playbook and just start just saying the words and calling the plays, and maybe it would be a pretty good offense. But I think it's how you attack defenses. It's how you utilize all the subtleties in the offense. There's a reason that you put a player in motion. You might only need a linebacker to move over one shuffle step, and it gives you the window you need. So it's the way you attack opposing defenses more so than exactly what the plays are themselves.
Is there a cumulative effect on the 49ers that eventually becomes material with the amount of assistance that they keep losing every year?
Yes, absolutely. And I think probably less on offense, although there's just been so many year after year. And I would, at this point, be shocked if Brian Gracie's not an offensive coordinator, play caller somewhere next year, if that's something he wants to do. He kind of seems to be the next guy on the list, and they pluck one guy away every year from the offense. I think where it really showed up is the defensive side of the ball and the firing of Steve Wilks today. Because, and I mentioned earlier how Steve Wilks didn't really have an opportunity to run his own system there, and it's kind of become the Kyle Shanahan defense. And this started back in 2017 when Kyle Shanahan brought in Robert Saleh, and it was originally that cover three sort of Seattle Legion of Boom style defense, and they thought, well, that's a little too much of that. Let's sort of get in the lab. And D'Amico Ryans was the linebackers coach, and he was there for all of it, and they were all together in the lab figuring out the best way to stop offenses, and they came up with a really sound scheme together, but Steve Wilks wasn't around for that. So I think losing D'Amico Ryans might have been the one where you really started to see, man, that one hurt a lot, because he was so good, and he was in the lab through all of this. And offensively, he's always going to have guys that were in the lab with him, and he's the play caller, and he's the main designer of everything. But on defense, I think we finally did see it this year, and you hope you don't start to see it on offense. But, since Kyle's still the guy on offense, probably less likely we'll see it there.
I got a couple more for you. Brian Peacock is our guest, Locked On 49ers. Make sure you subscribe up. He's on Twitter at BDPeacock. Give him a follow. What should Saints fans watching this team next year with Klint Kubiak as the offensive coordinator, what will be a noticeable difference in the offense with Kubiak calling plays?
Well, they're going to run the ball. There's going to be an attention to detail with how they block things up. And one of the things I've loved about the 49ers offense over the course of even just the 6-7 years that Kyle Shanahan's been there is how things have changed. So if you're going to be a good coordinator in the NFL, you've got to move with the ebbs and flows of the NFL and learn how to face what the adjustments to the adjustments that teams make to try to stop you. And teams were selling out to try to stop the outside zone. So what have the 49ers done more recently? Well, they've kind of gotten away from the undersized, lighter offensive linemen and started putting bigger people inside and doing more, gap sort of runs and try to counter off of, teams trying to stop the outside zone. But everything's really detailed in the run game. You got to have a strong offensive line coach, and then it's the details in the passing game and finding those windows. And there's a lot said about quarterbacks in Kyle Shanahan's system being game managers, and maybe not the strongest arms, maybe not laser show throws down the field and to the sideline. The word that I've come up with to describe Kyle Shanahan's passing game is aggressively intermediate. It's not a check down offense. In fact, there's fewer check downs in the offense than a lot of teams, and he really wants to attack the middle of the field. So even though there's not a lot of deep throws built in, and they will call those, and we're seeing a lot more depending on who your quarterback is, like we saw in Houston, but you will be moving people around to try to find windows, and it's not a check down offense, and the yards per carry will show you that it's not a dink and dunk type of an offense. It's aggressively intermediate.
Should I make the assumption then that Alvin Kamara is probably the player singular that would stand to benefit the most?
I would say Yes. Chris Olave doesn't seem like the type of receiver that would benefit the most from this type of scheme.
Why not?
But
Why not?
just because, the deep passing game, and that's where he shines, doesn't seem like the thing that benefits the most from it. But if you start to have safeties creeping down into the box, that gives you some opportunities, and you can hit some big plays. And, a lot of it kind of depends on your quarterback. And it'll be interesting to see what Klint Kubiak's spin on the offense is and how much it differs, because they've all been a little bit different. And it all depends on your personnel and your players. And if you don't have the Deebo Samuels, then maybe you need to lean into something different. So I'll be fascinated to see how that goes.
What about Derek? Last thing, thought on Derek Carr and how he would work with Kubiak?
Yeah, I think he's a good fit for it. I've probably been lower on Derek Carr, dating way back into his Raider days than most people.
Not lower than me, bro.
I think we've kind of seen what he is, and I wouldn't expect a ton more. But, any quarterback is going to play better in a well-coordinated offense that's balanced. And it's going to be a balanced offense. They're going to try to run the ball and put you in, shorter third down situations and try to scheme open some guys. And you might see some tight ends and some running backs, leaked out and have some open throws, which is good. And then, dial up the occasional shot play.
Ryan Peacock, Locked On 49ers. Good stuff, man. Condolences on the Super Bowl, but not really, because I hate the 49ers.
Yeah, that's okay. We feel the same way about the Saints, except for I think the scoreboard looks better, so I'm sure you guys are more hurt by the 49ers games than we are by the Saints games. But
I would
that's
assume
okay.
so.
I appreciate you
I
doing
would completely. I'm just thrilled that you hate the Saints. I don't know why you would. I don't think the Saints have ever beaten the Niners in a meaningful game.
Well, look, I'm old enough as well to remember the old NFC West days. I hate the Falcons more. How about that?
That's fair enough. We all hate the Falcons. At least we have that commonality. All right. My enemy's enemy is my friend sort of thing.
I think that's fair.
We'll go that way. All right, Brian. We appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Yep, anytime. Thanks.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.